Uh-oh. Have I been caught? No. John, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm sober.
And you're breathing.
Huh?
And you're breathing.
Well, I'm not sure about that one. Hey, they got a snack back there. They expect you to take some of it.
No.
Cheese? Do you like cheese?
I just had
It's diabetic.
I just had an ice cream cone.
You just ate?
An ice cream cone. An ice cream cone.
If I get an ice cream cone, I go to White's or Harry Race and ask for non-sugared ice cream. And boy, do they have some good, they have one kind. And it's very good. It only cost me $6.
Only 6.
Yeah. Well, I wanted a special cone, waffle cone,
Okay.
and I wanted a double dose.
Good.
And I said, I'm of age. I assume you can give it to me cheap. Yeah, $6.
That's what we're here kind of talking about.
So anyway, it's good.
Nice to see you folks. Thank you for taking a chance for an hour with us. We've got some great people here today from Juneau. We've been having a lot of good time with them, and
Could you pull the mask down?
I think they'll be able to
Yeah.
answer questions and tell us more
Thank you.
about what they're doing. You're welcome. So from the Glory Hall in Juneau and from Housing First Collaborative Project in Juneau, Maria Lovich, who is the project director, executive director, and Morgan Erisman, who is the program director. And between them, they have a lot of experience and they have a lot of answers and a lot of ideas for us. Do you want people to save questions or do you want them to ask as they hear them?
Either way.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever works.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for letting us come and talk. As Gail mentioned, I'm Maria Lovishuk. I'm the executive director of the Glory Hall. And the Glory Hall operates with Juneau Housing First Collaborative Project. And Morgan is our program director. And we thought we would come and share about our project because we never get to go anywhere and Sitka is so wonderful. And also because there seems to be some interest. So thank you very much for having us. And so we're gonna just briefly talk about our project and the Housing First philosophy and our development process and our project partners, and then how it was paid for, and then what was done for us. Should I use a mic or?
Yeah, you want us to? People want the mic or do you hear one? Everybody okay?
And so, do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so the picture that you saw, the first slide, is a picture of the building, the Juneau Housing First Collaborative. We call it Forget Me Not Manor is the name of the building, and it provides 64 units, single adult units, permanent housing to adults who have experienced chronic homelessness and co-occurring disorders. There's one secure entry that is staffed 24/7 with 2 staff members, so that we keep the building secure and safe and know who's kind of coming in and out. There's case management and a clinician on site there, Monday through Friday, who can provide a various number of supports. We go to food banks, we help applications, there's therapy groups that go on, cooking groups, several number of things. There's also a clinic on site that's run by GME Health and Wellness. They're the Community Behavioral Health Center. It's called the Midtown Clinic, and they have a physician there, a physician's assistant, and a pharmacy. The tenants have access to that clinic, just going walking through a door without, you know, any shoes on or anything. And then it's also open to the community as well. Let's see, there's also wellness activities, conference rooms, we can have groups, we can have meetings, AA meetings come in, and the project is located on land that was contributed by Tlingit and Haida. That's just like a small little summary of what we do.
And so this is a typical unit in the building. We are around 300 square feet. Some of them are a little under, and some of them are a little over. The ones that are a little over are ADA accessible completely. That's why they are a little bigger. And each unit has its own bathroom and its own little kitchen. And we follow the Housing First philosophy.
So the Housing First philosophy has been around for almost 30 years from Sam Sembris, and it's really founded on housing as a human right, harm reduction, low or no barrier access to services, and just providing kind of a warm and welcoming environment. We have the stability of having 24/7 staffing so that if a tenant ever needs anything, there's little pagers in their unit. They can page down to the front desk, or as well, we can page them if they have appointments to try and help prompt them. Supportive services are available, but they do not have to participate in them. They can just come in and out of their apartment as they please. If they want to engage in things like mental health, physical health, any of those things, they're on site to help with those, not having any barriers. Tenants have a lease, so their lease is for the rest of their life. They can live there as long as they want. But they also have the kind of Landlord-Tenant Act and any applicable laws and regulations. The building rules are simple and fair. We do have a tenant code of conduct that we ask tenants to follow, but it's pretty easy of just kind of being a good neighbor, keeping things cleanly, things like that. Yeah.
Is it a wet or dry?
It's wet. We like to, yeah, it is wet. We do have a population that's chronically has co-occurring disorders, mental health, substance use disorders.
And so a little bit about our development process. The building was built in 2 phases. The first half, the one that's done, was built first, and then the second half that's not done was built second. The first half was built using modular construction. The units were framed off-site at the triplet construction building on the waterfront there, and then brought over on a big truck. And then the second building was just stick frame, constructed just using stick frame construction. And it all started when Bill Hobson, who was the executive director of the Downtown Emergency Services, came to visit and speak about the Housing First concept. A lot of us went to the meeting, never heard about Housing First idea before. It didn't really stick at all, but then we kept on exploring the topic, and in 2012, the Alaska Mental Health Trust flew folks from Juneau, somebody from the city government, somebody from the police department, somebody from the hospital, social service representatives, and members of the business community to see other projects. One in Duluth, Minnesota, and then another one in Minnesota, but I should have wrote it down, but I don't remember what the second project was called. Apologies. And that really turned a lot of people around. And about the same time, we started doing a vulnerability index survey. So walking around once a year and trying to survey every individual experiencing homelessness in our community to determine what the numbers were and what the need was. And then around 2013, 2014, it really seems like every segment of the community really wanted something to happen. The emergency room docs were fed up with unnecessary visits. Our AMTs did not want to keep on picking up people. The ladies and gentlemen who were houseless were having a really hard time on the streets. The service providers were really burnt out. The business community was really upset about what's happening downtown. And so people kind of thought that something should happen, and more the community thought what should happen is a housing first type project. And so that kind of started the planning process, but nobody really wanted to do anything other than planning, really. Like, it just seemed too overwhelming to develop it and to operate it. And then in 2014, the Glory Hole decided that we also don't want to own the project, but we really want the project, and so we decided to coordinate the effort. And probably a week later, the housing authority stepped in and said that they would like to donate the land for the project, which was really huge because where main office building was also located to the land. So this was a landowner and a neighbor that welcomed the project, the most immediate neighbor. So that was really great. And also having site control allowed the project to start seeking funding. And then 2 weeks after that, magically, Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation released the notification that grant funding was going to be available for this type of project. And we were sort of told not to apply because the money was, and it's a very competitive process, and the money was going to go to Anchorage, and we were just really far behind, probably weren't going to get it. The application is really long. We were really encouraged to wait and get further down the line. And our assembly, actually, after hearing about this, wanted us to get farther in line and have the chance to get this money. And so they, in the period of 2.5 weeks, passed an appropriation for our project of $1.5 million contingent on us getting the Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation grant. And then the Housing Authority contributed a brilliant grant writer who wrote our grant, and after, we kind of fast forward by 3 years, and we opened the phase 1 of our project, which was 32 units in the clinic. And then in 2020, we opened the other 32 units. And the phase 1 was really hard. Like, it was really hard figuring out how it's going to work. And there was a lot of opposition. Phase 2 happened really quickly and was, like, I would say 1/10 of the work of phase 1. The business community was really on board. Our hospital actually contributed money. We did not have any more opposition from the neighbors because they saw what the project has been doing for 3 years. And we knew how to write the HFC grant, so it was much, much better. And so, because the project was so overwhelming for everybody, we broke it into several different pieces. So, like, everybody took a chunk we were most familiar with, and that approach, I think, really helped us to get the project off the ground. And so, the Glory Hole had a lot of experience providing meals and just, everyday basic support to folks. And so we took on supportive services. And I don't know how we took on project coordination because we've never coordinated the project, but that's just happened. And then our housing authority had a lot of experience developing buildings, and so we took on the development. And then St. Vincent de Paul Society had a lot of experience with maintenance and rent collection and landlording duty, and so they took that on. And then our community mental health provider, Juneau Mental Health and Wellness, very comfortably took on clinical services. And to do this, we had to form the 501c3, which is the owner of all of the buildings. And so kind of spreading it around like that really made it manageable. And we also did this, I think, really cool thing where So it's 501c3 and it has a board of directors. And on the board of directors, in our bylaws, it states that all of these entities have to be on the board if they are to be consistent with our bylaws. And so that really gave other partners the opportunity and the responsibility to make sure that this project succeeds and keeps going. So that was really cool. Any questions so far? Anything? And so how was the project funded? This is how it was funded. It required a lot of funding, and some of the funding sources kind of conflicted with others, but we made it work. And yeah, we are happy to talk about any of them if anybody has questions. And then this is the operating funding for the project. Every unit has a voucher, and the reason for this is so that folks can live in the project without having inability to pay be a barrier. And we're totally very happy to answer any questions about this vouchers as well. And then Morgan is going to talk about the study. So University of Alaska did the study for what our project did, 6 months, a year, and
2 years, yeah. So myself and Heidi Brocious did a study on this project. We started in 2017, right as tenants moved in. So the tenants were identified to move in, and we met with them and asked them if they wanted to participate in this university study, where we were going to look at service utilization and kind of some health and well-being questions that we also asked. They all signed informed consent. We went through the IRB review board, so everything was approved by the university. And we asked if we could look at the number of times they had been to the emergency room, the number of times they'd been to the fire department or ambulance ride, the number of times they've been to our sleep off or sobering center, and the number of times they'd been in contact with the police. And we looked at that 6 months back and then 1 year back prior to moving into Housing First. And we looked at it 6 months into living in Housing First and 1 year into living in Housing First. And we saw pretty drastic results. I don't know, kind of it's kind of blurry up there, but I can read some of them off to you. So in the first 6 months, we saw a 45% decrease in ER usage, 99% decrease in sleep-off visits, 66% decrease in contacts with the police, and 54% decrease in the fire department. Almost all of them was statistically significant, and myself and Heidi went on to publish this study that I have some copies with up here. The graph is that's kind of telling as well of how the drop-off was. So because tenants had a home, had a place to go, and had supportive services, they were no longer utilizing these costly services in the community. There's been more studies that just show how it saves the community money by having individuals who experience, even in having wet housing, are able to have a home and have somewhere to go. So this is another kind of look at it, and this was just kind of some of the demographics. The average age of our residents was 51 years old. We're still seeing that with our phase 2, mainly male, 72% male, 28% female. Sorry, it was a little blurry up there.
Sorry.
Mainly Alaska Native or American Indian, about 84%. The education was interesting to see. Over 60% have a high school diploma, if not some college degree or graduate degree. Over half are disabled. And approximately 11 years was the years homelessness for our population in our housing. There's that graph again that just shows the decrease after 1 year continued to go down. The service use and cost that's kind of there at the bottom, it just shows that, for our emergency room, with the fewer visits, because the tenants were living in housing, it ended up being about 4 fewer visits to the ER per week, which might not seem like a lot, but if you're going to the emergency room with an emergency and somebody is there, taking a bed that doesn't necessarily need to be seen in the emergency room, it can make an impact. 2 fewer police contacts per day because of having people housed, 1.3 fewer sleep-off patients per night, and 2 fewer transports per week from an ambulance ride. So having an ambulance more available for your community.
Oops, sorry, where's the
Okay.
random insert?
This was a 2-year look at kind of the alcohol use, so talking about how we are a wet housing. A good majority of our tenants have an alcohol use disorder, and we don't monitor how much alcohol is brought in. We work with the tenants where they are at. That's really a principle of the Housing First philosophy, is having that harm reduction model. If drinking is not something they want to reduce, but they want to work on their physical health, we will be there to work with them on that. If they want to work on their emotional health or their relationships, that's what we are there to meet them where they're at. This showed 2 years after move-in. Alcohol use did go down. At 2 years post-move-in, 16% of the tenants reported not using alcohol in the last 13 days. 16% of the tenants reported using alcohol 2 or fewer days out of the last 30. And binge drinking also went down. At 2 years post-move-in, 26% of tenants reported that they did not binge drink in the last 30 days. And 2 years after move-in, 16% reported 3 or fewer days of binge drinking. So even though we have supportive services on site and it's not required, tenants still participated in it. It's really coming from that place of no judgment, not having, and just kind of accepting and meeting them where they are. Yeah.
I'm interested in how that compares to compulsory participation.
Give me a,
You're saying they're participating voluntarily in
Yes.
support services.
yes.
And so you show some interesting results. There must be a comparison to facilities that, for instance, require that you deal with your alcohol problem and participate in AA or do whatever you have to do, but you must be participating. How does that, is there a study that compares these approaches?
We don't have a study, but I do know just from working with the folks who are, so Housing First opened in 2017, and lots of these folks I've worked with since 2009. And one of my personal reasons for getting involved is that a lot of the folks who are in Housing First, we would go into treatment. So we would enter our treatment facility, Rainforest, where we couldn't drink, and we would go in, and some of them have done it 9 or 10 times and would get kicked out. People would get kicked out of GEMI housing all the time, which requires both services and sobriety. And so we just would fail over and over again in those programs, with particular people. And so I don't know if the outcomes in the programs that require services are better or not better. They might be, but I do know that for our patrons, we just failed, time after time, got kicked out of the housing and became homeless again. So just,
I'm familiar with Rainforest, so that's a good example.
And that's kind of what this philosophy is saying that programs have done over the years, or our participants have had to do over the years, right? They go into a homeless shelter, they ideally hopefully go into a transitional shelter, get a job, and hopefully find some permanent housing. We are removing those barriers and jumping them right into permanent housing. And then they are able to hopefully get a job or work on their physical health or work on their sobriety if that's a goal they have, by giving them that housing immediately versus having them work through those steps of going to treatment, going to transitional, going to this. It's harder to do that without having somewhere to lay your head every night.
Not that it can't be done, it's just hard.
anything is possible.
Yeah.
True.
Any other questions?
Gail.
Could you speak about what I heard you talk about a little earlier about that even though when years ago when we went to the administrator of the community hospital, he said to me, we're not losing any money. As soon as people come in here for services and they don't have insurance, we sign them up for Medicaid and we haven't lost anything. And it's not
it's not a drain on us at all. Could you speak on how that might be a misleading statement? from an experience?
You know, yeah, so we had a similar response from our hospital when we were trying to build phase one. But what we did find out after doing further research was that Medicaid will not reimburse for what they deem to be non-essential services provided to quote-unquote, sorry for the term, frequent flyers. And so our hospital was in fact not able to recoup the payment for various services which people who were using the hospital primarily due to the fact that they were homeless were using. There's also no reimbursement for a non-emergency ambulance transport. And so after we did build phase one, our hospital contributed $250,000 in the unanimous decision by their board and staff to phase two. And I think sometimes it just takes a little bit of looking into the billing data and also just seeing, you know, how the project works, you know, once it has been operating to kind of shift a little.
If a person has a felony in their background, is that a barrier to getting services?
Not most felonies, because we do have HUD funding. Folks who are on the sex offender registry cannot live in the building, so that's the one barrier. And then also, if folks have been convicted of manufacturing methamphetamines, they cannot live in the building. But other than that, a felony just in itself is not at all a barrier.
Okay.
Oh, fire, sorry, arson, like intentionally setting buildings on fire. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My question is about your intake. First off, is that the St. Vincent de Paul category they take care of? Is it y'all come anybody that wants to, or is what process do people go through?
So our partners have merged a little bit. We still are engaged and have all those individuals on our board. Currently we do our own landlording in-house and our own maintenance in-house. The landlording process, or the intake process, is a little complicated. It's with the case care conferencing,
So
right?
we have three ways that folks get into the building. The most common way for 64 minus 8 is 56. For 56 units in the building, you have to fill out a survey. And the survey basically measures or asks for your length of time on the street, and then also your vulnerability index score, which is supposed to denote like how likely are you to die on the street. So your hospital visits, your contact with emergencies or other emergency services, but all of that is self-reported. So this gets entered into a database, and every month in Juneau, there's a case conference. It's coordinated by the city, and the hospital, all of the shelters, Jamie Health and Wellness, the police, all participate, and the list appears. And so, and based on the score, and also whoever is deemed the most vulnerable, for instance, if somebody's been at the hospital for like 9 times in the last month, you know, they get referred to Housing First. And it's a community referral that's sent to the agency. And so it's one way. And I wish I could just say that that's the only way, because this just gets really murky. We also have, randomly, we have 8 vouchers that are different from all of our other vouchers. And they're called 811. It's a program, 811 program. And so to get into those units, you get a referral from an agency. And then it goes around and around, and then the person gets referred by an entity called NeighborWorks in Anchorage.
And is this project open to any, like, native, non-native, Hispanic,
You have to be below 30% median area income, and you have to have been experiencing homelessness for a significant amount of time.
but any race?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
But they can't discriminate.
Yeah.
You know, and we're very proud to not discriminate against anything. Yeah. I guess there are people who set buildings on fire, but we don't really discriminate. We're just not allowed to.
So you allow meth addicts in these rooms too?
We allow all individuals
No matter what.
who suffer from alcohol use disorder, methamphetamine use disorder, and we work really hard with those individuals on whatever goals and things that they want to work on, whether that's just maintaining their housing, their health, any of those things.
Thank you.
And it's been challenging, just to not, just to be honest. When we were envisioning the project, the sort of intended audience for folks with a chronic history of alcohol abuse. But what we're seeing is that folks who just use alcohol are very few and far between, and we're just seeing use of whatever is available. And so initially the project actually, or the case conference, tried to not refer people who utilize methamphetamines into the project, but we have changed that, and Morgan and staff have actually been doing like a tremendous amount of research on what's happening everywhere else in the country, and we now do have a methamphetamine use policy. Units do get tested for methamphetamines. Illegal drugs are not permitted in the building, and also, but definitely what is not permitted in the building is meth usage to the extent where the meth residue is actually registering on the testing strips above a certain level.
Yeah, we work very hard from a harm reduction standpoint. So if a tenant is experiencing, say, really bad health effects from alcohol, we may suggest switching from vodka to beer. Maybe that'll have less effect on their esophagus. If somebody is having really bad health blood infections from IV needle use, we will suggest them to go to a syringe exchange and get clean needles. We now have clean needles and Narcan kits on site. We really try and reduce any harm that they're having from any of their substances. We provide no judgment, no stigma at all. We just want them to be healthy and safe. It's really the majority of the project, yeah.
Did you expect a big turnout in Juneau when you opened up phase one?
So our original calculation, we wanted to build 55 units to begin with. But because of what funding was available, we could only build 32 at the same time, hence the 2 phases. And we did expect all of them to be full, and they were full. There was a wait list after phase 1 opened. Yeah, so definitely, and we did a lot of talking to our patrons, Glory Hole patrons, and people around the Glory Hole, just to make sure what we were building was something that people would utilize. Because it'd be really bad to just build this multi-million-dollar buildings and then nobody came, and I guess we'd turn it into an Airbnb, but we have Airbnb laws.
You guys is there on the application or the agreement, is there room inspections?
There is. We do weekly home inspections. We're not trying to be in their life and be in their business. We're pretty just making look for if anything's broken, first of all, because we do maintenance. Is there any bugs or infestations? Is there any bodily fluids or biohazards? If they pass their home inspections, several times in a row, we check it less. We'll check it once a month. We'll check it once every 6 weeks. If it's not so good, then we will continue to check it. We've never evicted anybody for a dirty home, and we've never evicted anybody for not paying rent. We will just be more motivationally engaging in like, hey, do you need help cleaning your home? Do you know how to use the mop bucket? Do you know where it is? We find when people move in, they are still sleeping on the floor. They are leaving the radio on because it's too quiet. People need help kind of reintegrating back into what it's like living in a home again.
What's the rent?
30% of your income or $50.
And the actual rent is $875 a month.
And the tenants pay that?
No, the tenant only pay 30% of their income, and HFC or this 811 program pays for the rest. And if the income is zero, then the tenants pay $50.
We work very hard to help the tenants engage in sometimes tribal resources for rental payment, APA, Adult Public Assistance for rental resources. A lot of times tenants will get a large sum of native dividends and will pay 6 months at a time. We really work hard on not having rent be an issue. We don't just let it slide and we don't evict anybody, but we will, how can we help you? Where do we need to get this money? We also take rental payments 24/7. Any time of night somebody comes in with $5 and wants to pay, we put that on for their rent.
Is there a floor plan of the units?
We do have a floor plan, and I put it on here, and I was like, nobody wants to see the floor plan. But I can share a floor plan with you on the computer.
Yeah.
I'm just afraid if I try to do it now, it will kill everything.
Probably will.
They're really nice units. They are. They've got, like she shared the picture, they have an intercom. We set them up with a starter kit. We have a good neighbor store so they can purchase things that they can't buy with SNAP benefits like toilet paper or laundry soap. They earn good neighbor bucks by doing something nice around the building, mopping or sweeping. We have a janitor that's a contract employee there. It's really, really fun job.
When do you expect phase 2 to be done?
It's done.
Oh, it's done.
It got done in October of 2020. So yeah, it is done. It's yeah.
Are they all full?
Well, the 811 units
Yeah.
really hard to get into, and so we're 3 empty 811 units. But hopefully we will get imminently filled because it's really hard to have empty units when we have people sleeping on the street and the rooms are just sitting there.
COVID was harder, made things a little slower too.
Could you talk about how vouchers get assigned to, say, new housing developments for homeless people? How does that, what's that process?
Yeah, that is, I think, that's a great question, and that really is what made it possible. And so if a community is building a project using AHFC, Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation money, Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation will work with the project to make sure that unit gets sponsor-based voucher, because otherwise it's impossible to operate this kind of housing. And so when we applied for our construction funds from AHFC, we have to develop an operating budget, and into our operating budget we wrote in HFC voucher income, and then we got in touch with HFC at the very beginning just to make sure that they knew that we can't operate the project without these vouchers, and that's how we got assigned the vouchers. And it's really a tremendous thing for communities, because I think most communities in Southeast have significant housing issues. Housing is scarce, rent is really expensive compared to other places, and so having this resource to come into the community, and unlike the one-time capital funds, this resource stays with you year after year after year, and I think it really helps the economy locally, and And also like it makes it possible for people to have housing. The 811 vouchers are totally different. And those we only got because on the capital funding application were points that you get. And if you checked the box for no points for the 811 vouchers, you would have lost 12 points, and we just couldn't afford to lose to Anchorage most likely. And so we checked the box, and now we have 811 vouchers.
It just take a longer process of the 811.
And once people move in to the 811 units, it's really great. Yeah, when the troubles are over.
Could you speak about your board members and what each of them brings or is responsible for and how that works in conjunction with their professional work?
Oops. Yeah, so it's really great to have the hospital be on the board because it really helps us to work together. For instance, when the project started, it was it was a little bumpy to figure out patient care and information sharing and record sharing, and because the hospital has a person on our board, it's just a lot easier to iron out this kind of details and make things run smoother for staff and the residents. And of course, the housing authority, they are the landowner, and they also did maintenance on the project for 3 years until we could take over it, and landlording and maintenance for 2 years after St. Vincent stepped away. It's really great to have the city, just to make sure that, what the project is doing is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, so that the city has a say over what we do. And so again, we're collaborating. Our whole thing is, we can't do things like this by ourselves. Nobody really has enough resources, and so we just really want to collaborate. The Glory Hole, we just want to make sure that our patrons are getting into housing. And before this project, it was really hard to get somebody from the Glory Hole into housing. When somebody gives the 247 South Franklin Street address as their address, it's an automatic thing against them. And so we want to be able to participate in the tenant selection process. Same for Ware, and same for St. Vincent's. And of course, the mental health provider, who also provides primary care, is really necessary. We have been able to work with them a lot on some of their policy. For instance, prior to this project, folks could not begin receiving services unless they went through the GEMI health and wellness intake process, which is very long. And a lot of our folks just didn't do it. They would come in and then they would leave. And once you don't sit through it, or you miss appointments, you have to go through this. It was hard. And so now what we have, which is really great, is the people are able to access services without the intake process if they live in the building. So I just think it's such a complex issue for us, but it was really great to just have everybody at the table. Hi.
I was just wondering, who started all this in Juneau? Because I'm amazed. And was the city assembly on board? I mean, who did you guys have to convince the most? Because I think we're having a bit of trouble here in this town.
So our mayor at the time was, before he became mayor, he was the fire chief. And so when we came to him asking for funding, he actually said, you guys are only asking for this much, because he really saw the value in this. So our assembly was on board, pretty much. Well, I think initially it was really hard to convince. I mean, I was initially really opposed to it myself. Super opposed. Yeah, after the first speech, I did not want to do it. And I think maybe convincing the business community was was challenging at first, but then we actually, you know, the person who I think made it happen more than anyone, Bruce Denton, he owns lots of storage units, he owns a big building downtown, he built lots of things, and he got convinced because he talked to Bill Hobson, not the first time, but maybe, you know, time number 4 or number 5, and once he got on board, like that's kind of how it got going. But I think it does take, it just takes time, I think.
Some of the harder barriers convincing people is around kind of that wet housing concept, right? Nobody's necessarily against giving people housing, but it's letting them, you know, giving them housing where they can do what they want, which may be to consume a lot of alcohol. And so if we were to just to build another housing complex, great, we'd have another housing complex that we put people in, and then they're going to get evicted again and go through that same cycle. And so convincing people that we can have a housing complex where they can do whatever they want to do and give them the supports that they need, that I think took some convincing as well.
And they have this article that Morgan co-authored. And so when Morgan co-authored this article and did the study, Morgan was, you know, not our program director. And it was just, you know, I think it's just like more of a testament of how like special this is, because when Morgan like agreed to come work for us, which was amazing. But I think the article talks a little bit about what, you know, your question asks, which is like the community shift. I think it's pretty interesting article. And
yeah, and I think that's how we really got to like get the momentum for phase 2, and how she said there was really no opposition, was showing that data of it's working, it's effective from both the business and both from the individuals' lives. Yes.
Is your city and borough of Juneau representative an employee or an assembly member?
He is a police officer right now, and it went through, you know, like various, you know, the first person was the chief housing officer, and then he switched off with our police, Officer Quinto.
Could you speak a little more on how you gained support services with the hospital or the mental health issues, and how you won them over to be a part of it?
I think, you know, one of the things was that our mental health provider was probably not convinced, because I think the original model was that, you know, you enroll into services first and then you get into housing. And I think what it took for them was going to Duluth in the second project, which name I cannot pronounce, and just see. And when the delegation went to Duluth, they just did this really cool thing where they set up, I think, like a half an hour interview. So the community mental health director of that organization got to meet with their counterpart in Duluth, you know, our police chief who went, actually he wasn't the police chief, but he was lieutenant. He got to meet the police chief there. Our homeless shelter, you know, got to meet with the homeless shelter. And so I think that was maybe, you know, the mayor met with the mayor. And so I think that was like maybe the most powerful thing, just like talk to somebody in your position to see what their experience has been. I think that was really pretty helpful. And I think just like this data, of course that happened after we already had a project, but you know, like talking to people about building phase 2 was so much easier, like I mentioned, than phase 1, because we did have data. I think also having the, because we did do some of the, you know, from our, the sleep-off center, which was then operated by the hospital, we asked not the administration but the staff to give us the numbers of like 3 most frequent flyers and what they estimated, and the estimated cost of them for just a couple of months to the city. And that was just really powerful. Like that was really powerful for people to see that, like especially folks who were like, you know, like, why would we spend money on this? Well, you're already spending money on this. It's just a better way to spend money on this. So that was really helpful. And I think just like people hearing from people who were experiencing homelessness, like not, you know, just like seeing people on the street, but like seeing their stories K2, our local radio station, recorded some interviews, and I think that's really powerful. But I think again, like it was time, like it just took a lot of time. I feel he had a question, but he left.
Could you talk about, could you suggest some things that you've seen that would help us understand how someone who might be involved in quite a bit of alcohol use on the street would have a turn of heart and mind because they're have a little heart. How does that look?
That's a hard question.
Does anyone know how that looks?
I mean, some don't, and we have to be there and be ready to support them anyway. What do we say? Celebrating small miracles or tiny miracles. So taking a person who hasn't connected with their family in years, but they're not going to stop drinking, but I've helped them connect with their family. I consider that a small miracle. Being able to get on disability, being able to clean their home, being able to cook a meal that they haven't been able to cook. Sometimes there won't be that turn of heart. Sometimes there will. We've had people get sober, get jobs, and make some differences in the community. But that can't always be the expectation. We have to have that frame of mind, and that's what can be challenging about this housing first philosophy, is meeting the tenant where they are, no matter where that is. Whether that's where they're drinking half gallons every day, or where they are wanting to get sober and having them get sober over and over and over again. I can't necessarily say where the change of heart is, but I know that if your staff or community is in the right heart for that, then that'll make all the difference in building that relationship and rapport with them.
And there are some like national trends to where folks who are stably housed in permanent supportive housing projects, like as like not like individually, but as a demographic, do switch from drinking hard liquor to drinking other alcohol, but less degrees, such as beer, for example. So that happens. There is something to, like in my conversations with folks before, you have to stay warm at night, and you have to stay awake, and you have to feel okay about yourself and your circumstances, which is really hard. And so you just end up drinking all night. And so when you have a home, is your head up, sorry? Or?
It was, but I'm waiting.
Oh, okay. So that kind of stuff, I think. So definitely different kind of alcohol, probably a little less alcohol, but also just like feeling of safety, so you're not needing to self-medicate as much, to just like help yourself get through the night. I think that's,
Have you had people get worse? Like drink more?
We have had, we've had a few, yeah. Usually what we see is a shift towards working on their physical health, which is usually getting worse by their drinking, but they're able to make their doctor's appointments. They're taking their meds regularly, so they may drink more, but hopefully we're trying to help combat that a little by taking care of their physical health.
And I think just to answer your point, I think there's like this period that also happens, like when a person first moves in, it's like pretty rocky. Like there's a lot of decompensating and thawing happening.
But then I want to do like a housewarming party type thing.
Yeah, myself and Heidi published a second article. It's called "The Trauma of Being Housed." I didn't print it out, but we've talked about the period, the first 6 months being the trauma of moving into a housing and trying to, like, what do I do with all this in this space and everything, and you do see a little dip of things getting worse.
But then it usually does end up, like evening out. And for some folks, the period is longer, and for some folks the period is shorter.
Did I get it correctly that you do control access to the building?
Yes.
So that the party is not on just because one person has a residence?
No, if I think I'm understanding you correctly, and that's a good point, by securing that access to the building, we found tenants before have shared that they've had apartments in the past, and one of the things they could never do is tell their family no, or tell that person no, they can't move in. So at least now we are the gatekeepers, and we can say, sorry, can't come in. Our visiting policy is one person in the building with the tenant, and they have to stay with the tenant at all times, because safety is our #1 priority. Being housed, you have a right to feel safe in your house, and so if you have a visitor, they can't be wandering around the building going to who knows who apartment. So the party is normally kind of among the community members that are there.
So that seems like an important element of the design of any project is control of non-participants.
Absolutely. That is, yeah, that was a big thing they shared is I was evicted from my last place because I had way too many visitors and way too many guests, and they can't say no. That's right. So that's our job. That's what we're there to do.
Morgan is really good at saying that.
Yes.
Did you have a?
Yeah.
Were there any other building sites that they kind of wanted to think about? Like, say you got the valley, and then you got, but Juneau's sort of like, you got downtown of Duffin, there's no real estate down there that you can physically build that many units, opposed to, say, the valley or somewhere close to facilities people can walk to. So you're saying that it's by Home Depot and Costco? Yeah, that one.
So we had a survey done before we started, like before we even knew where the land was going to be, and the survey said, one of the questions on the survey was, would you prefer this to be, and we listed all the neighborhoods, including out the road. So it was Douglas, downtown, Lemon Creek Valley, Oak Bay out the road, and then other, and then don't care. And 67% of the people said they don't care. Surprisingly, a lot of people said Douglas, like 7% or so. And then several folks wrote, don't care as long as I have a door that closes. And so, like, that was really comforting when the housing authority offered the land, because it definitely wasn't on Douglas or downtown. And actually, a lot of folks said that they didn't want to be downtown, because downtown is where all of the old habits are, and, the dangers. And that was actually one of the big community concerns. Like, you're taking all of the people and you're like shipping them off somewhere, and like, how can they possibly get back to downtown? And that is, like, to us, that was like a really easy question to answer. I mean, our ladies and gentlemen are very, very resourceful. We have a bus, like it's insulting to think that we don't know how to use the bus. Like, we most certainly do. We know how to do things that are much more complex than using the bus. And so, we survive on the street for, so even though, like, we didn't really have a lot of other side consideration, because this was free, flat land with like some fill on it. It is zoned correctly for this kind of project. But when we were now just developing the new Glory Hole, where we didn't get free land, like, this question kind of like came up again, and we just kind of, land is really hard. If it's not hills or stream, it's really hard to come by, and we do have, bus service, and we do offer transportation assistance to folks who have, mobility issues.
Yeah, we help them get caravan or on the bus. You bring up a good point, though. When tenants did first move into the building, it is away from downtown, and there was a little bit of like, did I lose my connection to people? Did I lose my supports? Did I lose my friends? And so we had to work to build a community in the housing. We have house meetings. They cook a meal all together on Tuesday nights. We had to work into that, and it took a little bit of time, and kind of added to the trauma of being housed a little bit of like, I've lost my friends and my buddies, and but they were resourceful and grew out of it, and now have a home there.
How many rooms are on each floor?
6 on the first floor.
And then it's 64 minus 6 is 58, and then 58 divided by 2 is 29.
Yeah.
29
like that, yep.
on the
second and third, and 6 on the first floor. Yep. And then there's 8 washers and dryers on each floor that are at no cost, and they can use anytime. Smoking decks on each floor.
That's a great feature.
Nice garden space in the back that we're working on this summer. Yeah.
I just wonder, is each room then single occupancy?
It is.
Okay, and you do both men and women?
We do. We've got.
And you don't separate the genders?
No, we've got.
It's just a mix?
Yeah,
But we will-
72% male, 28% female.
Okay,
But
and then
we-
I'm wondering, are they able to have people spend the night if they want?
They
In
are.
their own room?
They're allowed one overnight a week.
Okay.
If there are individuals that want to have families visit, we have like a family visitation program on Saturdays where they can cook and use an activity room that we have and have families visit. Yeah.
But it has been like a little challenging because in Juneau, folks are like in relationships a lot of the time, and we've heard from patrons, like if we could just move in together, then it would save a unit so somebody else could move in. And we just noticed that like a lot of times the relationships are not super stable, and we were actually advised by a bunch of patrons themselves and also by the legal community to just make sure that, yes, if people are in a couple, like please move into the building, but please have different units that are, separated from one another by other units.
They each have different units and different
Safe
leases.
space.
Yeah,
Just
and they
so
can
you
go
have a
back and
choice.
forth. If,
Yeah.
husband kicks her out for a little bit, she goes to her home, vice versa.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Last call for questions or comments. It's just been great.
I'm really
Thank you
excited for you
very
guys.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you for all the information.
I've heard for years growing up here as a kid, people talking about trying to get a men's shelter here for years. They haven't known where to put it and stuff like that. And I just want to congratulate you guys on all the hard work and actually seeing something actually get pushed forward with the homelessness for at least men, because here in Sitka we don't have a shelter for us. We're in our cars, we're in the woods, we're bouncing from bench to bench if we can, or out there at the laundromat, so this is a big help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing
saying that.
your story and time with us. It's really, without you guys sharing with us, we wouldn't be able to do it.
That's for sure.
So what's your impression or reaction to the proposal on Jarvis Street with the 12 individual 9 by 12 shelters that are lockable and then having a service building? Does that seem like it would be a fit for here with your impressions?
Well, I've been in Sitka a little bit. I've spent some time here, like I mentioned, commercial fishing badly, and then I kayaked here a lot. But I think communities, like in my opinion, like really know, like best what communities need. So like if you think, I think the site is beautiful. Even we went to the site a little bit ago. It was like so beautiful, really cool site. I think like energetically, it's really nice to have a river. We have a creek, believe it or not. Like it's what's it called, Wondermill Creek.
Yeah.
Like it's actually salmon-bearing stream on our property or next to our property, next to Clinton Clyde Regional Housing Authority's property, and then the new Glory Hole is actually next to a Jordan Creek, which I think when we talk about this with patrons, like it really makes like sense to them on some level, so like some really special level. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, I think if this is what the community decided is best, yeah.
The Jarvis location, those are sited for dry cabins, I think. Dry cabins, correct?
If you wanted to have bathrooms and whatnot. The other thing we do have also, we have this 4 other vouchers in there for scattered site apartments. So we're able to, pay 70% of the rent for 4 to 5 people, depending upon what the rent is. And we did notice that when we are getting folks to live in those units, like we can't put folks with like really high vulnerability scores in there just because of the impact, on the landlord, the unit, in the neighborhood. So, yeah.
There are the 2 different models of Housing First, the single site and the scattered site. And the single site is like what we do at Forget Me Not Manor, and then the scattered site. And it can be a little bit harder because the services aren't on site, but it sounds like you guys will have some services on site.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're, to make this difficult.
You're done.